Welcome to Fruitful Trees, and here we are tonight with our special guest, Alex from Tropical Acres Farms. And we've done this a while ago, and now it's after mango season or coming to the end of mango season. Welcome, Alex, to the show. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We're gonna get started off by asking you, as we're getting questions, everybody type your questions in the side chat for Alex. They don't need to be only about mangoes. He also grows mameis and avocados and sapodillas, but we're in mango season now, so I know a lot of you have mango questions. But as we get started with this, Alex, here we are, 2022, towards the end of mango season. You want to share with us some of your the things you've learned this year about mangoes that maybe you didn't know before this year, that caught you by surprise this year, or just some new things you've confirmed, maybe, if not learned? You want to share some of those?
I think one of the remarkable things was we had across most of Florida this year, we had kind of a depressed mango season, but it was for different reasons. So one part of the state, it was because it got too cold. There was actually freezing events, and then in the southeastern part of the state, it didn't get cold enough. And so very opposite reasons for why you didn't see as many mangoes in South Florida this year compared to prior seasons, especially compared to last year. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting situation in that, it was too cold in a big part of the state and not enough cold to get them to flower in, Miami-Dade, Broward, and lots of Palm Beach counties.
Now, that's something we don't have control over, basically. But what about the things we have control over? Have you noticed any difference in maybe the way you sprayed this year, or maybe the watering, or just the
I would say definitely observing more aggressive strains of fungi, especially powdery mildew, but also anthracnose. So anthracnose is not traditionally a major issue in the coastal zone, and we're starting to see it a little bit more during the bloom and fruit development period on certain varieties that we didn't see it previously. Definitely more aggressive powdery mildew that has to be controlled with pretty dedicated frequency. So I think those are challenges that everyone, regardless of whether they're a backyard grower here or a commercial grower or small farm or whatever, have to be aware of or mindful of and prepared for. Obviously, you can't control the weather. You can't control rain, and you can't control ambient temperature, but there are things you can do to make your tree, give your tree the best possibility it can have to fruit through nutrition and proper pruning and horticultural care in general. And I think with each passing year, the days of having the mango tree that you can just forget about and expect lots of fruit from year after year kind of become further and further distant because of the hurdles that are getting put in front of you. So not to say that you can't have a tree in your yard and forget about it and not do anything and it won't fruit every year. That'll happen for some people, but the likelihood is declining. So
okay, yeah, because I do know people that they don't do anything to their mangoes, and they
sure
have mangoes.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a good amount of questions, and one of the most popular questions I'm getting now, since we're in the late season, a late mango season, is, in your opinion and experience, what are the best late season mangoes to grow? And I'm going to say specifically here in South Florida, because I know it's different in every region and you can't cover every region right now. So in South Florida, what's the best late season variety of mangoes to grow, in your opinion?
Right. So this is a kind of a very specific question, because what are the best to grow versus what's the best tasting? And so it's not the same question, right? Because of the changes that bacterial black spot brought, some of the old standbys that have been popular over many decades, like Kent and Kit, are no longer worth attempting to grow. So it kind of takes a lot of varieties out of the potential list. So we've looked to the newer ZIL varieties, which have very good, not only very good resistance to bacterial spot, but they also taste amazing. So amongst those, the ZIL M4, the cotton candy, the little gem. Our little gem trees still have a bunch of fruit on them, extremely disease resistant. Honey kiss, not quite as late as the ones that I've mentioned so far, but it is a late season mango. A non-ZIL variety that's late season that's very disease resistant is Neelam. It's also very consistent, heavy fruiting tree. It is a mango that not everybody enjoys, but certainly one that I think belongs on this list that we're talking about here. Aside from that, I've had good results with Gold Nugget. If you're a person that really adores the Kent mango, Gold Nugget's pretty similar, and it does not have the kind of problems with bacterial spot that Kent had or has. So that's one that I kind of forget to talk about sometimes when it comes to late season varieties. I'm still on the fence on Beverly. I haven't had terrible bacterial spot issues with it, even though I'm aware that it can rot. It hasn't been too bad with bacterial spot. And Beverly is a very late mango. I mean, we expect to have some on the trees into September this year. I'm sure I'll find a couple that'll make it that late. So, but that's the list that I would say is
ZIL 80, right? ZIL 80. We did
ZIL 80, right? So we talked about ZIL 80 in that video the other day. ZIL 80 is an interesting one for sure. I think it's one that more people should explore. It's not one that okay, somebody that's coming to me that just wants to plant 3 mango trees in their backyard and one of them is going to be a late season mango. I'm probably not going to reach for that one first, only because it can have issues with uneven ripening. We're not 100% sure about its bacterial spot resistance. So I feel a little more confident in something like M4, which I would rate slightly higher, but it's a different flavor group as well, in terms of production and that kind of thing. So ZIL 80 might belong in that list, just like Beverly. If Beverly is not too bad with bacterial spot and rot, it probably should be in this group. But I've had so many different reports on Beverly. My own experience with it has been up and down. So those are ones that are on the cusp, and they're certainly delicious enough as late season mangoes to warrant growing if it's just based on their eating quality. Those still hold up. Beverly and ZIL 80, even though they're from decades ago, they might not be M4, but they're much better than a Kent or a Kit to me. So
now, of those best ones to grow for late season, what's your favorite tasting one of that list?
M4 has a very interesting complex flavor, but a lot of coconut in it. I just adore that mango. Most people that try it are very fond of it too. So we get very high marks on that one. And then cotton candy, not very far behind. So I think that's the pecking order in terms of how I'd rate them on flavor. And M4 is one of the best mangoes we grow, regardless of season, regardless of early, middle, late. So,
and of course, we're talking about South Florida, and there's so many different regions. I get a lot of questions about California mangoes, but let's finish South Florida. So that's the late season. I know there's way too many mangoes to go through a big list, but if somebody just had room for 3 mangoes, 3 mango trees, we covered late season. In South Florida, what would you say is a good candidate for growing, not just tasting, but for a grower for early and mid season?
Early season, it's going to depend a little bit on location, the answer to this question, but some really good early season ones are Angie, Pickering, Fairchild. We're talking about for backyard growers here in terms of reliability and eating quality as well. I mean, if you're picking between, if you only have 3 trees to plant, you really need to value production and consistency. because you don't have much of a choice if you want to get fruit every year. So like if you plant something that's erratic in terms of its production habit, as much as you might enjoy the flavor, there's going to be too many years where you won't get as many mangoes as you want from your trees. So Angie, Pickering, Fairchild, those are some good ones. If you're really close to the ocean, on the East Coast in particular, Rosy Gold is one to consider if you enjoy that classic mango flavor. But those are a few in that first group, and I would probably pick Pickering. Middle season, I really like the CAC. The CAC mango is a really exceptional mid-season variety that performs well year after year for us. It is a vigorous tree though, so this is why it comes down to a person's individual yard. If they don't have space for a real vigorous tree, they might go with a less vigorous variety that can be maintained, let's say, in the 10 to 12 foot range. And then for that, as far as mid-season goes, I've really been impressed with Orange Sherbet this year. That's a mid-season mango. It's been maybe the best mango this year, or one of them, certainly a top 3. And the tree is not terribly vigorous here. It's kind of dense and relatively compact. And I could see you keeping that tree at like 10 foot or something like that. So in limited yard space, that might be a good choice. Also, I'm really fond of the Sugarloaf. That's somewhere between an early and a mid-season mango, I suppose. Might kind of bridge the gap between the two of them. But people had mixed results with those this year in terms of production. So just a couple that popped into my head. And obviously we just talked about late season mangoes. So imagine if you picked one of each of those, from that group, you'd end up with some really terrific fruit during the course of a relatively extended season. You're talking about maybe depending on what part of Florida, from May until August or even September with something like M4, sometimes making it that late. So
sure. And I've known you have these boxes on your website that are sporadically available right now still, where people can place orders for local pickup only the night before. So I guess you're putting these mixes together based on what's available, and it is kind of late season. I've seen white Paris in there. Is that a late season or a mid season?
White Piri is actually a mid-season mango, but and so the white Piris that we have at the farm in West Palm, we have 3 of them there, are all finished. But the one in my backyard bloomed a little later than they did. And so it is still carrying a few mangoes. It's almost done as well. But the fact that I still have a few of them on the tree isn't really truly representative of its typical season. I would say white Piri is usually a June to July mango, maybe a late June through most of July, not really a true August mango most years. So, but it's exceptional. Great mango, but more of a collector's choice rather than one that I would recommend to somebody with a small yard or somebody that's new to growing mangoes. Yeah.
Does it grow pretty big?
No, it's not terrible in terms of its growth habit, although my backyard one has been a lot more aggressive than the ones at the farm for whatever reason. But it's more of a factor of that it is very, very prone to powdery mildew. It's a magnet for it. If the backyarder that's growing it doesn't spray it to control powdery mildew, or they miss some applications, it can easily wipe the crop out. It's prone to anthracnose when you bring it inland. By the coast, it does fine. And in fact, in where we are here, which isn't as close as the farm is to the ocean, white Piri has not had issues with anthracnose. But we have to spray to control the powdery mildew on it. And so when I think of trees that I'm going to recommend to somebody that doesn't have a lot of yard space, so they therefore don't have a lot of trees that they can be planting, white Piri is one that I abstain from recommending. Now, if we're talking about somebody that we would classify as a collector, that would be somebody maybe that's got space for more than 5 mango trees or something like that. Then you can talk about white Piri as something to consider because it's a really exceptional mango.
Okay. Next question is, you've said in the past Sweet Tart was your favorite tasting mango. You were skeptical on how it does with disease and so on, BBS. So what's your opinion about Sweet Tart? Is it still your favorite tasting mango? And is it a mango that you'd still recommend or not necessarily?
Sweet Tart is still my favorite mango. They were really great this year. We really enjoyed them. In fact, Jack Sturrock cut open a couple of them at the end of the season for Sweet Tart because we just picked the last few in the last week or so. And the bricks on these was 30 on the refractometer, which is unbelievable. I've never seen mangoes register that high in Florida on bricks. That's like California levels, 30. So really remarkable. I still love the Sweet Tart. I still don't have one in my own backyard because I've been frustrated by the trees. I think that it is a mango worth growing on the west coast of Florida and in central Florida, like Orlando, in situations where you have space for a decent sized tree because it's not a small tree. I think it's a great choice for Southern California. If I was like somebody in Southern California with a tiny bit of space to plant one tree on, it might be Sweet Tart that I would choose over anything else based on feedback that we've received from people growing mangoes in California. So, overall, you're talking about flavor, production, it rates really high in that kind of climate. Over here in South Florida, our winters are a little too warm for that variety to flower on a consistent basis. Now, maybe someday that pattern changes and we start getting, cooler winters again, and the Sweet Tarts respond with maybe a little bit more frequent full blooms, but not from what we've seen the last several years. We might even top work some number of our existing Sweet Tart trees because we have close to 30 of them. So, but in terms of flavor, it's still top notch to me.
Okay. So I've tasted it. That's not been my experience. It's excellent. I like it better now than I ever have. I liked it a lot better this year, but not as much as you. So you mentioned California. So give us early, mid, and late season. If somebody could have 3 mangoes in California, what you would suggest?
So I've never grown mangoes in California, so let's start with that caveat. However, based on reports that I've received from people, I think a good early season one for California might be a real aggressive one like Dupuis Saigon or something like that. My understanding is that the middle and the later season mangoes tend to taste better in California than the early season, which is kind of actually almost the opposite of here in South Florida. Mid-season, CAC Peach Cobbler does very well in Southern California from everything I've gathered. That is exceptional, or at least it can be. And then as far as late season goes, probably one of these new ones like Cotton Candy or M4. Those I think are probably vigorous enough for Southern California. The big thing with California is you want vigor. You want something that is going to be growing very actively, which is a little different from the desires of some of us in South Florida. But as far as late season varieties go, Cotton Candy is an aggressive growing tree. So that might be a good one for a late season Southern California yard, I would speculate.
All righty. All right. So question from Ram. What is the best time of year to transplant, and how is the best way to do it?
I can tell you that if we're talking about transplanting mango trees, the best time to do it is usually between, let's say, April and October, because what you want to avoid is cold weather after transplanting. So they usually transplant pretty well when the temperatures are warm, and even that can be late into the year. Sometimes it can be late into November. But when you get those nighttime temperatures that drop into the 50s, which can happen anywhere, let's say between November and March, it can pose some trouble for transplanting. They don't necessarily respond as well. So, warmer months of the year for sure. and you either got to root prune them, or if you're going to just take them out cold turkey, you got to hack the canopy back. And then you got to water them a lot too. So, which, one of the benefits of transplanting them now is you're doing it during the rainy season. And so that gives you some assistance in terms of watering and humidity.
Okay, okay. Another question is, what's your take on Dr. Campbell's hybrid breeding program with crossing wild mango relatives with regular mangoes?
I remember when Richard started doing that. It was a while ago. I feel like it was 10 years ago or more. I think it's interesting from a genetic perspective, and from a botanical one, because these crosses are kind of new territory. Is it going to result in something that you or I are going to want to grow? I'm not sure. I'm a little more skeptical, and that's because I have grown some of these species. In fact, we do grow a couple different kinds of Mangifera casturi. We grow Mangifera lalijiwa, and we also grow Mangifera odorata, which is sometimes called Queenie, depending on what part of the world you're in. And so these indica cousins, sometimes we say mango cousins, because when we say mango, we're usually referring to Mangifera indica, but some people just call these other species mangoes as well. A few things about them. Number one, I've never been particularly impressed with the eating quality, or I should say the flavor, on any of these species. And I've tried mango species besides the ones that we're growing. Like I've tried Zelenica, and I've tried Rubitella, and some of these other ones, and they range from just kind of lame to nasty. Some of them are just repulsive to me. So that's the first thing that kind of pops into my mind in terms of like why it might not turn out so great. Number two, these species do tend to be very resistant to anthracnose, which is awesome, right? Because anthracnose is a huge problem with indica, especially certain cultivars of indica. However, and in fact, not only are they resistant, they're really almost immune. I've never seen anthracnose on our lalijiwas or our casturi fruit. Just doesn't happen. Doesn't happen to the flowers. However, they are not immune to powdery mildew. They're actually pretty prone to it. And they are all, as far as I can tell, prone to mango bacterial black spot. Very prone to it. Casturi, bad. Laliji was horrible with bacterial spot. And I feel like if you're going to cross indica with these things, there's a good chance that you're going to get some results that are very prone to the disease that's one of the most destructive of mango that we now have to face here in South Florida. So, but that should not be read as like a criticism of what Richard's doing. I think what Richard's doing is great, and extremely interesting. It's just like, I don't know if we can expect that we're going to get stuff, at least immediately, that's going to be worth growing in your backyard in Fort Myers, Florida, or whatever. It might take a while to breed something that's got all the positive traits that we like in indica and the positive traits that we like in these cousins, these other species. So that's so I'm not like expecting anything like groundbreaking really soon, but I'm glad that Richard and his sons have been working on that stuff. It's certainly interesting.
Okay, another question is lemon meringue and lemon zest, which one is more productive and least disease resistant?
In my experience, lemon meringue has been more productive on a consistent basis. It has been more resistant to bacterial spot and anthracnose. They're about the same on powdery mildew. They're both prone to it. Lemon meringue seems a little bit more eager to flower than lemon zest. For us, I got rid of our lemon zest trees for the most part. So I guess you can say I'm a lot higher on lemon meringue than the lemon zest. So I like lemon zest better as a fruit. I think it tastes superior to lemon meringue. but I would not plant a lemon zest over a lemon meringue at this point in South Florida. Now, if I was in another area that doesn't have issues with bacterial spot, okay, let's use Southern California as an example. I would definitely plant lemon zest over lemon meringue in Southern California. So depends on where you're growing it. But Southeast Florida, I would still plant lemon meringue first.
Okay, okay. So the next one is from somebody named David in Port St. Lucie. And with all the new varieties, what he's still considering a Hayden. What's your opinion on the Hayden?
Well, I mean, if you grew up eating that mango and you love it, then that's your mango. To me, it's irrespective of the fact that you can get, to me, much better tasting mangoes these days. I think it's outdated technology in terms of its disease resistance and production habit. If you wanted something that was more disease resistant than a Hayden, and every bit as productive or more so, I would consider a Van Dyke, because they taste extremely similar, almost identical. And the Van Dyke doesn't get the problems with bacterial spot that Hayden does. So, but I mean, if that's what you like, that's what you like. You know, if people are telling you to plant like this latest and greatest stuff, and yet you're trying that stuff and you're like, well, I'm still partial to the Hayden, then you can still grow Hayden here. It's just that if it was me in Palm Beach County, for example, where we have bacterial spot very established, I would not plant Hayden here. I would plant something. If I wanted a classically flavored mango, there's a bunch of other ones on the list that would come before Hayden. So
give us an example of 2 or 3 of them.
I just gave you Van Dyke.
Okay.
Bailey's Marvel is resistant to bacterial spot. Now, if I was inland, I wouldn't grow Bailey's Marvel, but closer to the coast, it's fine. It does actually pretty well. It does well for both me and Cecil Brumfield. Maya, that's a pretty good one. Kind of disease prone though, so I don't think you're getting anything over Hayden with that, but it's a better tasting mango than a Hayden, and it's classically flavored. Peng, really good, classically flavored mango. Spirit of 76. Spirit of 76 is resistant to bacterial black spot. But when you take it inland, it has the same anthracnose problem. So yeah, those are a few that classic flavored mangoes that I would plant over Hayden.
Okay.
At least here.
Someone asking, Josh is asking, what's the best mid and late season mangoes to grow inland about 10 to 14 miles west of I-95 that produce well?
Right. CAC certainly can do well inland. I think orange sherbet ought to do pretty well. It's not too bad with the disease from what I've observed personally. What else? We're talking about mid and late season, right? I've been impressed with Carla. I think Carla can do well, which I probably, Carla is one of those ones where it's hard to say whether it's a mid or a late season mango, but it probably belongs in the discussion of later stuff because its season kind of mimics that of Kent, but it's a much better mango. But I think you can grow that one in the interior too. As far as like other ones that are more proven inland, you've got Maha Chinook. You have to decide if it's good enough for you, but it certainly thrives when you bring it inland. It produces fine. Valencia Pride, talking about an old school classically flavored mango. Valencia Pride is a mid to late mango, I would say more mid, that does perform well inland in places like Loxahatchee and Jupiter Farms and stuff like that. So those are a few. I really like Orange Essence. Orange Essence is a mid to late mango that I think should have pretty good disease resistance qualities for growing in an interior location. Neelam did great for me in Loxahatchee. I had a bunch of them, never had to spray them. They were so disease resistant. It was remarkable. The fruit was not pretty, but I mean, if you wanted to walk away from that tree and not do anything to it, it could still fruit. So that was pretty good. Yeah, I'm not sure how cotton candy will do inland. I think M4 should do okay. I think Little Gem will do well inland because I haven't noticed any anthracnose issues with it. And anthracnose is your biggest concern when you're growing a mango tree in the interior. So that's a good group there, I think. There's certainly others that I'm leaving out, good candidates, but that gives
Okay,
you quite a list.
okay. So I haven't heard much this year from you about Gizelle. How'd that do this year?
Gizelle, it tasted great, but it had problems with bacterial spot, and I had been concerned about that as a possibility because I'd seen it on that tree before, and because based on the parentage that Gary Zill told me it had come from, um, you know, I figured that bacterial spot was going to show up on it eventually, and it certainly did this year. I did lose a number of the fruit to it. It didn't have like a full crop anyway, like it had a partial bloom, but it still ended up making decent amount of mangoes. Quality of the fruit was excellent, excellent. So year after year, that's an exceptional mango, but probably a mango that I would think about for West Florida, Central Florida, or Southern California. I don't think it's a good choice based on the bacterial spot issue for Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, Broward, or maybe even the Treasure Coast. So.
Okay, so somebody was asking about Dwarf Hawaiian. What about Dwarf Hawaiian in general?
Dwarf Hawaiian was one of the best mangoes this year. It was exceptional, almost universally positive feedback, except from the folks that can't tolerate the bit of fiber that it has. But this was a great year for Dwarf Hawaiian. The trees bore very well. They've been fairly consistent producers for us, but they definitely had good crops this year, and the feedback was so positive. It was just a great year for the Dwarf Hawaiian. So I'm glad that we have a lot of them. This year definitely confirmed that we made the right decision in growing quite a few of those. So.
Okay, so the next mango is Orlando Gardner. I had brought him to your farm this year to visit you, and he's got a great channel online, and me and him both love this mango. And it's been one of my favorite tasting mangoes this year, ice cream mango. And he's asking, what's the history with ice cream mango as far as production?
Not very good. I would say that it can make, a decent crop. We had a decent crop on ice cream this year, okay? But when the fruit are very small, the actual yield you're getting off of that tree isn't very impressive. Definitely no commercial potential there at all, even for the small grower that's like, on an acre of land or something like that. I would not recommend growing ice cream. Somebody that's a collector, backyard or whatever, then, or somebody that maybe wants to grow something that's not too aggressive and has that kind of spice profile, that you find in mangoes like Amon Passan or White Puri. It's certainly got a pretty strong similarity there in terms of flavor. Then it's an option, but I just feel like the fruit's too small. It's strangely enough, it's thought to be derived from Julie. It's one of the few Julie derivatives that's really prone to bacterial spot. So we found that out a couple of years ago. So I just can't in good conscience recommend it. And it was one of the best varieties this year. It was exceptional this year. There's no doubt about it. But there's other exceptional mangoes that I would grow over the ice cream. So, it got some popularity, A, because of the name, and B, because of its kind of a slow growing habit. It's not as dwarf as like a Julie or something like that, but it's certainly a tree you can keep small and it will keep flowering. But it's had some years where it's had very few fruit. It's had years like this year where it made plenty, but the fruit just came out kind of small. So
is it a variety that somebody can consider growing in a pot, or is it eventually
yeah, you could grow it in a container. Yeah, with pruning, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, a mango tree doesn't have to be a true dwarf like a Julie or something to grow it in a pot. So
okay. Let's see, I'm trying to look at this question here. Hold on. Keep posting your questions, everybody. Somebody's saying, what can you use for? No, I don't understand. The Dev that's asking the questions about the stem not due rain I don't understand that question, so please repost it. Now, Alexander's asking about the Sophia Fry. Is it more productive than the Julie in Florida and less prone to disease?
No, from what I've seen, our tree, we only have one. Our Sophie Fry has not been more productive than Julie so far, but there's a reason for that. It has not had the full blooms that we get on Julie. So it seems like it's a little harder to trigger it to bloom completely here than the Julie, which flowers completely pretty much every year. Now where it flowers, it looks like it can produce probably a little better than Julie. So it comes down to, if the Sophie Fry blooms, yeah, it probably does, is capable of fruiting heavier than the Julie itself. It does taste different than the Julie. It is, Sophie Fry is the parent of the Julie mango, or at least the maternal parent of it, for those that aren't aware. And you can see the similarities, but I feel like it's I'm sorry, no, I don't know what I'm saying there. Forget what I just Julie is the parent of Sophie Fry. I can't believe I said that. Sophie Fry is the parent of Julie. Sophie Fry is the parent of the Carrie mango, but it's a seedling of the Julie. And it's closer to me, it's closer to Carrie in flavor than Julie, if we're comparing the two. So if you're going to want to grow something that's similar to a Julie, I'd rather grow Dwarf Hawaiian, but it would depend on location too, probably. Dwarf Hawaiian is very similar to Julie in terms of its flavor.
Okay, another question from Justin. He says, and you kind of answered this and from a seasonal standpoint, but it says, what are some promising new varieties for commercial production, flavor, shelf life, and production?
Okay, commercial production, sure. Because that's a different question than talking to people growing them in their yards and stuff. So commercial production, new varieties. If we're defining new varieties as like, the newer Gizelle stuff, or is it, stuff that's been around and not as well known, I'm not sure. But amongst the new Gizelle hybrids, I think Orange Sherbet has very good commercial production capacity. Carla, Orange Essence, those are impressive. I think Cotton Candy for sure. Honeykiss. What else? In terms of early season, Angie, definitely commercial grade production from that. And we call it a newer mango, I suppose. What else? There's definitely good stuff that I'm leaving off. CAC. What else? Commercial. M4, definitely commercial grade production. What else? Well, those are just some that popped into my mind. Sunrise is a commercial grade producer.
I was going to ask you about Sunrise because it's
that belongs in the conversation for sure. It produces pretty well every year. It's an aggressive tree. I don't like that aspect of it, but in terms of the productivity, and all these mangoes I'm talking about here, by the way, have very good flavor. I'm really only talking about stuff that's like if we're rating them on a 1 through 5 scale, like a 4 and above, so 4 or 5. So they rate well in terms of eating quality and yield, right? Because the yield has to be there if you're growing it as a business, like on a commercial scale. If you're making that investment, you really have to have good yields. So I'm leaving stuff out here, of course, but those are definitely some that pop to mind that are newer varieties, not talking about old school stuff that is, proven commercial standbys.
Okay, when we look at less vigorous trees and for backyard varieties, what's the one that it tastes like a sweet tart, but I forget the name, the one Richard named after his wife?
Sassy Love. Sassy Love.
What's your
Love.
Latest opinion about that? Because I know you're very high on that one, and a lot of people are trying to get that one but can't seem to.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion about that?
I'm very high. They were excellent this year. We didn't have the abundance of them that we were hoping, because one of the trees is a top work that I've really abused for budwood because of the number of tree orders and graftwood requests that we've gotten. So that tree is our largest, and unfortunately only made a couple mangoes this year because we had to cut it so much last year. The other three are smaller planted trees, and it is a slow growing tree as a planted mango. And so, but I got fruit off of them again, and very good. I mentioned last year how it was a little closer to zinc in flavor last year. This year it was closer to sweet tart, I think. But it's not identical. It's its own flavor. Very high on it. You know, it's not being grown by enough other people to say that it belongs in any kind of commercial production category. But I think I've seen enough from it personally to say it's certainly a valid backyard candidate. And I shouldn't have left that off when I was talking about mid-season mangoes, but like the problem is that we're currently, I think we're one of the only nurseries at least that's making that tree. There's not a lot of them in the inventory of the state of Florida, so I'm always a little hesitant to recommend something that, you know, somebody's going to have to wait 6 months to get one or whatever. You're not going to be able to get a Sassy Love tree from your local nursery, whereas you might be able to get an orange sherbet or something like that. But yeah, Sassy Love is right up there with the elite stuff that's new and exciting. So I still have a very high opinion of it. And we're definitely, I probably will top work some stuff into Sassy Love to get more production, more of it. And I'll, at some point, I'll put one in my backyard too when I take a tree out. So.
Great. Speaking of that, when you take your trees out because they're getting too big, you know, in between the trees you've planted, your so-called temporary trees, when you take one out, is there enough space to put a new one in, or are the trees surrounding it too big already?
No, by that point, almost always by that point, the permanent planted trees have reached a size where it would not make sense to reuse that space. It'd be pretty rare for that interplanted tree to have grown so quickly that we had to remove it before its permanent neighbors had a chance to branch out into you know, a space that a new tree in that spot would be going into. So yeah, it's I haven't had that happen.
Okay, so I know 3 trees that you've gotten rid of because of various reasons, and bacterial black spot is Kent, Kit, and lemon zest. And I know you're reconsidering some of lemon zest, but so many people request it. But what are some current mangoes that might be on a so-called chopping block? Whereas if they don't start producing better, you're gonna completely get them off the farm.
That's a good question. Well, I mean, like, there's mangoes that we have at the farm that I'm thinking about top working. Amongst those actually is some of our sweet tarts, because we've been disappointed with the production from them and because we happen to have so many of them. But the other ones, like there's a mango we grow from Sri Lanka called Karutha Columban that has not been a terribly good fruiter, and the quality of the mango is mediocre. We don't really get a lot of requests for it. You know, really only people from Sri Lanka are familiar with it. So that's a mango that I'm considering just eliminating it and top working it. We only have one tree. Got another one called Dominica. I think we bought that tree from Excalibur years ago. It's not a good mango, or hasn't been impressive. I'm going to probably top work that tree. What else? There's certainly other candidates out there, but the number of trees I feel that must be top worked every year has been shrinking because we've top worked a lot of the bad ones. You know, some of the ones that had frustrated me in prior years started fruiting well just in the last 2 years, like peach cobbler. That was a mango that I at one time years ago was like, am I going to have to top work this someday? And it answered the call and started fruiting well the last 2 years. So we still have an intact Venus mango that probably deserves to be top worked, except that we've needed budwood to produce Venus trees. So that's one that's been so bad with bacterial spot that it's certainly been deserving of top working. Those are the ones that I can think of. There's a few that there's one that we got the fruit finally this year. It's called JB2, finally fruited for us. It was a mango I got from the birds down in Naples. I wasn't impressed with the fruit. Turned out to be prone to bacterial spot. It's not worth keeping as far as I can tell. So we're going to top work that after only one season of production. Splits open really badly. Thinking about top working Naomi, prone to bacterial spot as well. Not good enough of a mango to warrant keeping around. I'm sure there's others if I went through the whole list, but those are the ones that came to mind
So when you
for
say
top working.
when you say top working, do you just completely leave the stump and top work the budwood into the stump, or are you talking about just going around the edges and just top working the edges, or are you talking about both depending on the situation?
Well, what you're talking about is bark grafting, and when I top work, I usually just hack the tree back, and then when it starts to shoot back, and I can see it's recovering, I graft to the new shoots that emerge. So that's how I do it.
Okay. Okay. All right. You mentioned peach cobbler. What about juicy peach? What's your experience with that?
I like it. I think it's a good mango. Has not been terribly productive for us, owing largely to it not flowering as abundantly as we would like it to. It is very soft. It has no commercial potential at all for that reason. And I probably wouldn't recommend it as a backyard mango for that reason as well, because I feel like A, there's some of the newer hybrids are a little better, and B, it's an aggressive tree too, by the way. It is somewhat prone to anthracnose. We've seen it on the bloom and small fruits in West Palm. If that's the case, then if you're inland, forget it. I wouldn't consider growing that. My understanding is, though, it does well in Southern California. So there's another one that I wouldn't recommend for people in the Tri-County area, at least, that I could recommend to people in Southern California, because it's a vigorous tree and it's a good quality fruit. I'd rate it like a 4 out of 5, which is very good. So that's my thoughts on it. I'm not going to get rid of it. We're going to keep it, but I won't be planting anymore. I won't be top working any trees into it. So.
Okay. Another question is, as for fruits inland, how should we deal with anthracnose and disease inland? What spraying method should we use?
I think you need to be prepared to control both powdery mildew and anthracnose, because you will get both. Whereas along the coast, you might only get powdery mildew. Powdery mildew, easy to control. There's a number of different products. You can use sulfur. You can use like a heavy horticultural oil, like a JMS stylet oil. You can use what is it, potassium bicarbonate or whatever it is, like Millstop. That works too. And they're all like organic options there for you. Anthracnose is a different animal. You really have to be prepared to spray multiple products to control anthracnose. And there's cultural practices that you can use to limit, how much anthracnose your tree is going to get, irrespective of what you spray on it. Like, for example, if you don't overfeed your mango tree with nitrogen, the more nitrogen you feed a mango, the more anthracnose it's going to get on its bloom and its fruit. A lot of people aren't aware of that, but it's definitely the case. You want to make sure that your trees are getting lots of airflow and sun as much as possible. You don't want them, growing into each other or growing underneath the shade of other trees if you're trying to prevent anthracnose, because sun and air are your friends when it comes to preventing it naturally. But aside from those things, also limiting weeds and vegetation underneath the tree as well, because those things create humidity, and humidity means more anthracnose. But as far as like products you can spray, I usually tell people for anthracnose control, a good quality copper, okay, not just any copper, like we're talking better quality than what you're going to go find at Home Depot, Lowe's, or Walmart or something like that. I'm talking about like a copper with a good high metallic copper equivalent, whatever copper you end up going with, what kind of molecular copper it is, whether it's cuprous oxide or some of these others, copper sulfate. There's a bunch of them. You pick one copper, okay, one good quality one, and then you rotate it with another class of fungicide. Okay, so the other fungicide you use, that you spray the week after you sprayed the copper or whatever, needs to be in a different group. It can't contain copper. It's got to be like, it depends on if you want to be organic or not. If you want to be organic, there's biological fungicides, things like Serenade, Actinovate, double nickel 55. These do have some effectiveness against anthracnose, but they have to be sprayed more frequently if they're going to be used in the interior. Fungicides that are not organic and that are synthetics, and maybe that I might not use myself, but I know that if in the interior you're facing a much more difficult situation, things like manzate, chlorothalonil, those do work pretty well against anthracnose, and if they're used in conjunction with a high quality copper, you can usually keep anthracnose under control at that bloom and small fruit stage when it's most critical to do so. So that's my advice on controlling disease in an interior area where you're under more pressure. You definitely need to take better care of your trees from a horticultural standpoint, from just in terms of the way you're growing them and where you're planting them and stuff like that. And you have to be more on top of your spraying.
Okay, another question is, have you ever seen a Balanjo variety from the Dominican Republic growing in Florida?
Banilejo, yes.
Yeah.
We have a Banilejo tree. It has not fruited for us. It was been unhealthy for a very long time. Now, we got it from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA in Miami. They have it. And as far as I know, it's the real thing, but we're going off their word. So yes, it's in South Florida. None of the nurseries produce it. We stopped producing it. We did produce it for a little bit of time on order. So people would order Banilejo trees from us and we would graft them. But because our own tree was so unhealthy, chronically unhealthy, we were having a hard time getting healthy budwood to produce trees from it. So we have stopped offering it as a grafting request. Maybe if I can get the tree to be more healthy, or if I can, plant another one or top work a tree into it and then get rid of the existing one, then I might offer it again in the future. But as of now, I don't know where you could get a tree, because it wouldn't be from us, even though we have one. So,
okay. What mangoes are the most consistent with flavor?
Consistent with flavor. Okay, well, that's a valid question, because there is a lot of inconsistency. Some years, some mangoes will taste great, and this next year, the same mango tastes like nothing. I found Pickering is very consistent, extremely consistent in terms of flavor year after year. What's another real consistent one? Sweet Tart's been very consistent in terms of flavor for us. Other real good consistent ones. Fairchild's pretty consistent. CAC is extremely consistent. Yeah, I would say those are a few. And I can tell you that some mangoes are not consistent. Some examples of inconsistent mangoes, peach cobbler, which we just talked about. When it's on, it's great, but it hasn't always been that way. If you certain mangoes, if you get a lot of rainfall, there's nothing consistent about them. Graham, for example, very inconsistent in terms of its eating quality year to year. So yeah, consistency matters for sure. It occurs to varying degrees. Some of them, like Pickering, is remarkably consistent, never seems to have an off year in my experience. Not to say that it can't. But then there's some that I've never had it year to year where they tasted identical, like what's another one that's like that? Believe me, there's plenty.
I was sad this year to find out the inconsistency of the Pineapple Pleasure. That was disappointing.
Yes, so there you go. Pineapple Pleasure had been a consistent one for us for several years, and then this year they got better at the very end, but they fell victim to a lot of rain that we received in June, and it wasn't until the last 25% of the crop that they recovered and tasted like they should. In fact, I stopped selling them for a while during the season, just because I wasn't satisfied with the way they were tasting. So yeah, that's a consistency thing, even though that one, to its credit, for the 3 years prior or more, had been great every year, but wasn't great this year.
Yeah,
for most of it.
So Rico's asking about the Philippine mango. He said the fruits are splitting. What could be the cause?
Most oblong fruits are prone to splitting. Usually it's a function of you going through a lot of dry weather and then all of a sudden you receive a lot of rainfall, or if you weren't watering the tree for months and then all of a sudden started watering it, that can cause them to split too. The opposite can happen. You can go through periods of rainfall and then all of a sudden it dries out for a couple weeks and they'll split open too. It's just these differences in water potential that occur. And it's specifically usually a problem on varieties that have oblong shapes. So Namdok Mai has the same thing happen. So Philippines hardly the only culprit when it comes to fruit splitting, but that's usually why. Long period of drought and then all of a sudden inches and inches of rain over several days or a week or whatever, they'll split. So a lot of them will, not all of them.
That's a lot of Indian mangoes and so on. And you don't mention a lot about Indian mangoes. Do you grow a lot on the farm, or do you focus more on
Yeah.
Florida? US?
No. We grow a lot of Indian varieties. It's a long list at this point. The problem with Indian mangoes in Florida is they don't all love our climate and soil. Alfonso is the infamous one, right? We all know the Alfonso mango, and most people realize that it doesn't do very well in Florida. And then there's like a Montpassan, which fruit's great here, but it cracks open on the tree, and then like a bunch of the fruit aren't saleable. So Kesar has done reasonably well for us amongst Indian varieties. We've had success with varieties like Romani, some success with Ambika. Malika is very hot or cold, depending on where it's grown in Florida. So I don't leap to recommend that one as far as the Indian stuff goes. We've been impressed with a dwarf variety called Arca Nilkaran. That's like a dwarfish Alfonso, and it fruits pretty consistently here. What other Indian varieties could I think of? San Peri does okay in Florida, pretty well, actually, I should say, for an Indian mango. But then other problems can occur with Indian stuff, internal problems sometimes with the fruit. We've had issues with some of them souring out in terms of flavor when the rain was a little too excessive. I've had that happen with Kesar before. Alfonso can get spongy tissue here. There's a variety that was brought from India 120 years ago called Bennett Alfonso. It's an Alfonso derivative that we've been growing for a few years. We've been impressed with its performance enough to say that it will probably be a good Alfonso alternative because it looks and tastes just like Alfonso, and the foliage looks pretty similar too, but the production habit is completely different. So that's one to keep an eye on amongst Indian mangoes that we're growing. We have other stuff that we're just started trying out. We have some northern Indian ones that I have not been impressed with the internal quality of the fruit or the bloom production habit. So Indian mangoes, some of them will turn out well here, a lot of them won't. So that's why we don't necessarily promote them as much as some of the other ones, but we're certainly evaluating them. And you might find that we're going to be grafting at some point a few of those that we find that do pretty consistently well. Like I could see us grafting a lot of Bennett Alfonso someday for the folks that want Alfonso and they have to have it, But amongst all the Indian ones, the one that I feel has been the most impressive in terms of eating quality and overall performance in Florida is probably Kesar.
Wonderful, great. So we're doing, are you okay with the time? Because we got a couple more questions here. You're
Fine.
okay?
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. So tell us about ST Maui, because that's one you were really high on, and how'd that do this year?
Okay, we have 3 ST Maui trees at the farm. The largest one is had a huge crop last year. Paul, you remember that tree. Had a tiny crop this year. I mean, just hardly any fruit because it did not flower well this year. We did have to prune it last year. It was finally due for a major prune. And with the warm winter we ended up having, that tree didn't flower particularly well. Now there's another one on the west side of the house, in the middle of the property on the farm. That one flowered okay, not great, but well enough that it made a decent amount of fruit. So that was where most of our ST Maui fruit were coming this year, was from that tree. And then the top work, which is younger than the 2 planted trees, that fruited very well this year. It was the first year that top work had fruited since it was grafted. I don't know how many years ago, probably 3 years ago or something. So, so mixed bag in terms of performance. Quality very good. I really enjoyed the ST Maui fruit this year, and I had good positive comments. That one, you know, if it weren't for the aggressive nature of its growth habit, I would be more willing to recommend it to people based on its total value in terms of what it's capable of producing and the quality of the fruit. It's a mid-season mango.
And it does good with bacterial black spot.
Yeah. I mean, it's not. It might be moderately prone at worst. It's definitely not highly prone to it. Have not had major rot issues. I think it's fine with it. It's not a concern with that variety. The main concern is, can it flower consistently in your location? If you're in West or Central Florida, it probably can. It's the question is whether it can do it consistently in Southeast Florida. And in California, it should do very well also. So
Great. Okay, so another question here is the Kerry. It says, where does it rank now? It seems to be getting low grade. So where does the Kerry rank now, in your opinion?
I think Kerry is still a high quality mango. If we're grading stuff on that 1 through 5 scale, it's falling somewhere between a 4 and a 5. So maybe a 4, 4.5, depending on who you ask. Most people are not going to. Some people will say it's the best or whatever, but it's not, in my opinion, objectively as good as some of the newer hybrids. But it's still a very good mango if you enjoy that Indian Alfonso flavor. And I always hesitate to recommend planting a Kerry tree to somebody that's never had it before, because a lot of Americans object to it. About half of Americans and Westerners in general don't care for the flavor of the Kerry. But if amongst those who do, if you're the type of person that appreciates that type of flavor, I still believe it can be considered a high quality fruit, even if it's not in that elite tier anymore, because it's been kind of overshadowed by the newer selections that are objectively a little sweeter and better overall.
From my experience, Kerry's been very consistent in flavor. Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, talking about varieties that are consistent in their flavor year after year. Kerry belongs in that group.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking, what do you think of Tamar for a backyard grower? Tamar. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if it's what we know here in Florida as Tamar, that was introduced by the USDA, which I've started calling USDA Tamar, that is a very, very good mango. Okay. It's an West Indian group flavor, but super high quality. I don't feel like it's going to fruit well enough in South Florida. I think, and I don't know how it'll do in Central Florida. If it flowers, it fruits well, but it has not flowered well enough for us. I think it's definitely going to do well in Southern California. If you're in Orlando, if you're in Tampa or West Florida, Bradenton or something like that, you might consider trying it. But if I lived in, let's say, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, I would not try to grow that one, even though I like it, unless I was a collector. So if you're a person with limited yard space and you're in southeastern Florida, I would probably pass on that one, as good as it tastes. It's a very, very good mango.
Okay, someone's asking, where do you see the future of Florida mango cultivation? Will there be more commercial growers or more small farms with direct online sales?
You're already seeing that, actually. So I think I've talked before when I've given public talks about how we've been a part of this mango renaissance that actually now dates back to the 90s. So it's been almost like a 30-year renaissance that the mango has enjoyed in South Florida. But it is possible that we're seeing like a peak mango culture here. And that's because you do have these people who are planting trees we call them kind of commercial plantings, if you will, like acres of mangoes that were not being planted 15 years ago, so where do I see the future of it? Unfortunately, there is a limit in terms of how much land is going to be cultivated. There is a limit in terms of how far north we can reasonably expect them to survive. Another thing to consider as far as, mango culture in Florida, it's been through ups and downs. There was a craze over mangoes back in the 1930s and 40s and 50s. I mean, we had a Florida Mango Forum was extremely successful during that time, introducing new varieties, getting people interested in mangoes. But they went through a period of decades where they were not thriving. in terms of people planting them and stuff like that. And there was a few reasons for that. One was just, leadership and things like that in terms of within the nursery trade and in horticulture. But beyond that, there was environmental problems. We had some terrible, terrible freezes in the 1950s and in the 70s and 80s. And they really limited the range and scope in which mangoes could be grown. And we've been very fortunate for the last, well, really 30 something years now. We haven't had those devastating freezes on the scale that we had back then. And we're talking about freezes that impacted like coastal Palm Beach County. I'm not talking about stuff that impacted Tampa or Orlando, Miami-Dade. There is going to come a day where we're going to get one of those freezes or two of those freezes again, and it's going to knock the whole thing down a peg. And I used to wonder if it would ever happen. And I remember one time Richard Campbell saying, he used to say, it will get cold again. It will get cold again, as warm as it has been. And I think he was right. I think it will someday. We will get one of those 1958, 1959 style freezes. 1989 was another one of those really bad freezes that really affected mango culture in Florida. The other one is hurricanes. Obviously, we've been without a lot of major hurricanes in the mango growing belt of Florida for a while. If you get a few of those, that can really, really impact things as well. So where do I see the future of it? I'm certainly still excited for the future of mangoes in Florida, and I'm glad to see that their popularity has taken off. But it's not guaranteed to keep going on this upward slope. We could run into some rockiness at some point. And another thing that we haven't really discussed is the impact of new diseases on mangoes. Obviously bacterial black spot was a huge threat, and we got around it because of all these new varieties that are resistant to it. But what happens if we get like Zika, which is a disease that occurs in Brazil and now exists in India? That disease can kill mango trees dead, and it's spread by like burrowing ambrosia beetles, kind of like the disease that impacts avocados, laurel wilt. So that's something that could be a wild card that shows up someday at our doorsteps, and we're not going to know what to do about it. And so I want to feel positive about the future of mango culture in Florida, but I'm mindful that it won't necessarily always be this joyous ride up, so to speak.
Sure. Okay. Somebody says, Irvin, I recently ordered a 4026 mango tree from your orchard. I heard that it tastes terrific. Can you give a little bit more information about it as far as growth habit and taste?
Sure. Okay. So that's one that we've been enjoying for a few years now. And 4026 was a hybrid from Gary Zill's breeding project. It was a Julie seedling, but very likely a hybrid between the Julie and the Gary. We only have one tree in the ground, so that's not a lot to go off of. I like to have multiple trees before I can draw conclusions and recommend something to people. But in terms of eating quality, every single year that mango just blows us away. It's delicious, very similar to the Gary. You've got a combination of coconut and citrus elements, very sweet, but a much more enthusiastic bloomer and fruiter than the Gary. So we see this as a potential alternative to the Gary mango for people who've wanted to grow it, but they know that it's a stingy fruiter or disease prone or whatever. We've not had any issues with disease on this tree. It's been a relatively slow growing mango tree, but part of that could be because of the spot that it's located in. It has had some micronutrient deficiencies we've had to correct. So, but it's one that I want to see more people grow. It's one that I should probably top work something into or plant another example of it so I can evaluate it further. But I am glad to see that people are interested in this variety and are going to try growing it themselves, because it's been very good. It's a mid-season mango, by the way. It's kind of small, so not a big fruit. We're talking about something like this, okay? But excellent eating quality. I'd love for more people to try it. I wish I had a bigger one that we could sell more fruit from. We have sold some of the fruit from it, but not to anywhere near enough people. So
Great.
glad to hear you ordered it. Yeah.
Somebody says, what's your take on Carusa Colombian productive taste and tree habit?
Which one?
Carusa Colombian.
Oh, Carusa Colombian. It's been a very disappointing producer for us. It's a vigorous tree, very vigorous, spreading, dense canopy. I don't like it. The flavor is kind of boring to me. It's an Indo-Chinese type flavor. So the Sri Lankan mango is probably, it's a polyembryonic mango too, I believe. So they must trace some origin to Southeast Asia, rather than Indian genes in terms of the genetic makeup of that variety. But I've not been impressed with it at all. In fact, Paul, that was one that I just mentioned. I was thinking about grafting that tree over, and I'm pretty sure I will. I don't want to keep that variety. It's not impressive in Florida.
Okay. Another question is, what season is Pink Sun Moon, and is it a great variety?
Sun Moon is an early season mango. So over in West Palm, you're talking about maybe late April, May, June. Other areas, it might be late May or June into July, depending on when your mango season occurs, relatively speaking, but it is definitely an early season mango. My opinion, is it a great mango? No, I'm not impressed with Sun Moon. It's boring. It's just another Thai mango to me. In fact, there are Thai mangoes I like better than Sun Moon. What else? Average disease resistance, productivity is okay, I suppose, but I know that it's mostly consumed green in Thailand. It's not like a ripe eating mango, but I don't really eat mangoes green too often. Not that I never do, but so Sun Moon does not rate high on my list. It's not one that if I could choose exactly, what we're going to plant, and we're not like collecting varieties, it's not one that I would consider growing. It doesn't impress me.
I was like you with the green mangoes, but I had Pride Kai Mei a couple years ago, and I eat it green, and wow, it was one of the sweetest mangoes I've ever had, and it tasted ripe and amazing. So,
well, I like Pram Kai Mu better than Sun Moon. So for perspective, I think as a green eating mango, Pram Kai Mu is better. Sun Moon to me is a little sour when it's green.
Yeah, okay. Somebody's asking, what mango cultivars flower the easiest?
Okay, good question. Some of the easiest blooming varieties also happen to be some of the earliest season varieties. So Rosy Gold flowers very easily. Edward flowers extremely easily. Rosa, Dwarf Hawaiian flowers very, very easily. We're talking about mangoes here that only need a couple nights of cold weather, like a weekend of it, and they'll throw some bloom, at least some. Besides those examples, a few others that flower very easily, in my opinion, are Ping flowers exceptionally easily. Jean Ellen flowers very easily. Pickering and Angie flower pretty easily. They can do it on like a week of cool weather and the whole tree can flower sometimes. That can't be said for all mangoes, but ours have been pretty willing to flower. What are some other varieties that bloom really easily? Well, those are all the ones that immediately pop to mind. Yeah. So
keep in mind, everybody, just because it's flowering doesn't mean you're going to get fruit, because I know a variety that flowers amazing, Sugarloaf, and it doesn't necessarily follow fruit with fruit.
Sugarloaf, yep, Sugarloaf flowers very easily, and one of the things about that is, Julie flower is another one that will flower, but if they come out all male, you're not getting fruit from it. And so the Gary mango flowers pretty easily for us, but the first bloom is almost always overwhelmingly male flowers. So the ease of bloom is important, but it's not the only trait that matters. So because there's a number of them that flower easily that have other issues that prevent them from fruiting well.
Sure. Somebody's asking about late season varieties. We already discussed that, so go back in the chat and you can see that. Somebody wrote, if you top work a kit or other bacterial black spot prone variety, will it be passed on to the top work grafted variety?
No, so that's a good question. No, I understand why you want to know that. And just within our own plantings, for example, I had a couple varieties that were really prone to bacterial spot that we top worked over for that specific reason. And like one was Diplomatico mango, another one was Oro. They're both mangoes from Mexico. I top worked both of those stumps into cac, and those cacs have never had any issue with bacterial spot. And I mean, these trees before they were top worked were getting decimated by bacterial spot. So no, the answer is no if you are grafting on a variety that is resistant. Now, if you take that kit or Kent or whatever and you top work it into another mango that's prone to bacterial spot like Hatcher or whatever, then yeah, you're going to get bacterial spot on it again. Almost for sure, but it's not going to make the new graft any more prone to bacterial spot if the cultivar is genetically resistant.
Okay. Now, Nina says she recently saw a video where I'm planting 10 feet apart. I'm not recommending planting that close. Now, I don't know if she's recommending you or me because I planted 10 feet apart, but I can tell you, and Al could attest to this, he had like plants 16 feet apart and then takes out one in the middle once it grows, but he gets enough mangoes off it in the first 5 years or so until he's ready to take it out. So do you recommend 16 feet to 20 or 10 to?
Well, okay. So just to be clear, when we've planted ultra high density, we went 8 feet apart and then removed every other tree. Our permanent high density is 16 by 20. Okay, and that 20 is between the rows, and that's so that we can fit equipment between the rows. So like a vehicle or golf cart or whatever. If you are going to prune the trees and you're not going to overfeed them, if you're going to take proper care of them in such a way to limit their growth, then you can grow them in high density in Florida and still expect them to fruit. But if you are not going to properly prune them, or if you're afraid that you're going to overfeed them or whatever, you know, you're giving your trees a bunch of turf fertilizer because your lawn gets a lot of fertilizer or whatever, and you're growing vigorous varieties, then you would want to go with a wider spacing than 16 feet, like wider than what we're using. But under our program, we've been successful at keeping the trees that size and still, for the most part, getting good production from them. But that's because we don't overfeed them with nitrogen. We cut that out early. We prune them. We shape them right. You know, we get them the fruit at a young age. That makes a difference too. So.
Great. Now, besides mangoes, you also grow sapodillas and avocados, a good amount of them, and also mamey's. Somebody's asking a question about a sapodilla. They're saying, I got a Salis Wood sapodilla scion from you. How long before I see some growth on the graft?
Yeah, so saps are tricky. For one, they're harder to graft than mango. Okay, like commercially speaking, the nurseries are usually happy with like a 70 to 75% rate of take on sapodilla. The other issue with the saps, though, is that when your graft can take successfully, and it can take 6 months for it to push. I've seen sapodilla grafts that took that long before they pushed anything. So I would not be surprised if it takes months, if assuming your graft was successful, which I hope it was. It could take quite a bit of time for it to push, but it will eventually push. Now, Silas Wood is a dwarf tree, a dwarf sapodilla, if you will. And it is not a very fast growing sap. And it will probably try to fruit relatively quickly. Make sure you strip the fruit off of it the first couple of years in an effort to get it to grow more. But it could take a number of months, assuming the graft was successful.
One of my highlights this year was I was in a farm and homestead, and it was the house that Silas Wood owned, and I got to actually see the original Silas Wood tree.
Yeah, so, that's really cool.
Yeah, so about sapodillas, how do they grow in pots, like before you get them in the ground? Does it make a big difference? Because I know on mangoes, you say get them in the ground early so the roots get adjusted into the ground. But what about sapodillas? Can they do well in the pot until they're like good size enough where they like need to get in the ground, or should they go in the ground as soon as possible?
I mean, I'm always in favor of planting trees in the ground as soon as possible, but if you're wanting to grow them in containers, Some saps are probably better choices for container culture than others, particularly the more precocious ones, the ones that bear fruit at a younger age, basically. So Silas Wood would be one, actually. That would be an example of one that I would probably want to grow in a container if I was going to grow a sapodilla in a container. Now, another really good one is the Makok, Makok. It might be pronounced differently in Thai, I'm not sure, but Makok is a good container sapodilla. What else? Those are the two. I mean, I've seen Alanos grown in containers and they were fruiting. That's a little more vigorous than the first two that I
What about
mentioned.
butterscotch?
Not enough examples of that planted out of mature trees to say. Ours has grown slow, but it's in a terrible location and it hasn't been well cared for. I've kind of neglected it because I forget where it's planted. You know, I'm not sure if that would be one that would.
So an
would be good
example
for-
like an example like butterscotch or any tree, would you say if it's not in the best location, it's better to be in a pot where you could have more control over what's happening with it than putting it in the ground and not the best location?
Yes, I do think that there's a valid point to be made there. So if you can grow it in a container and give it more full sun and air and all that good stuff, then you might be better off growing it that way than planting it in the ground in a situation that's heavily shaded and where it's likely to get neglected or whatever. So yeah, there are situations where you are better off growing it in a container. But either way, if you're going to grow a sap in a container, I think eventually you're probably going to have to root prune it. So, and you have to do that with mangoes too.
Okay. Okay. When you switch the container, you would root prune it.
Well, not necessarily. Like, let's suppose you've got it in its permanent container, and that container is like a 25-gallon pot or something.
Yeah, the bigger ones. Yeah,
a backyard. Yeah, like something that's reasonable for a backyard grower, not like one of these 100-gallon things or something. At some point, you're going to have to literally take it out of the pot and trim the roots, because otherwise it's going to get root bound and it's going to become unthrifty.
Until you can't pot up. As long as you pot up.
Yeah, you can pot up, but like let's suppose you reach a point where you're not going to have a 50-something gallon pot. Like if you're one of these people that's limited in terms of what size of container you're going to be using, then if it's going to be spending its life in like a 25 or 30-gallon pot, presumably, then you are going to have to root prune it.
Sure.
At some point, if you want it to stay healthy.
Sure. Well, we got some more mango questions, but since we've gotten away from that for a moment, tell us about your avocados. Any surprises with those this year, or how's the season looking? Because I know it's just starting.
Pretty good so far. Not everything has fruit, but a lot of them do. We've already been picking the early ones like Brogden and Dupuis and Donnie, which I'm not a big fan of, but Brogden's been excellent. Been eating those skin and all. I like to eat them with the skin on them. Dupuis also superb. We picked some Russell. Probably next up is going to be avocados like Bernecker and Catalina. And there was a few disappointments. Our Pollock didn't do anything this year. I think it has like one avocado on it. But our Choquette's doing well. Our Lula trees are loaded with fruit. Our Taylor tree is completely loaded with fruit. Florida Haas has a lot of fruit. Yeah, most of them are doing pretty well. I have to say, it looks like a positive avocado season this year.
Very good, very good. I'm excited about that, and you've helped me a lot with the graphs and everything, and the taking. So I'm excited because it's going to be a great year. So, all right, back to the mango questions. What are your heaviest producing mango varieties?
Heaviest producing. Okay, good question. Duncan. Duncans are machines. They churn out yield. When we're talking about yield as a factor of number of fruit times the average weight of the fruit, right? Because like you can have two trees and one's making 100 fruit and the other one's making 50, but if the one that's making 50, the fruit are weighing 2 pounds a piece, and the one that's making 100, they're weighing like 8 ounces, then guess what? The one that made 50 mangoes is out yielding the other one. But in terms of yield, Duncan is one of our best producers there is. Aside from Duncan, what else would I put into the high yielding category? I guess we get pretty good yield out of our Angies. Really impressive. Our Edward trees, these big old Edward trees, did phenomenally well this year. The yield was exceptional. What are some other ones that stood out? In terms of yield, Little Gem does pretty well. That's a heavy yielding variety. Going kind of in my head, trying to go tree to tree here, and identifying the ones that yielded the best this year. What else? M4s, they did really well. Cotton Candy, that was those trees, I guess we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 of those fruiting this year, and they all had very, very impressive crops. What else has been yielding pretty good? Those are the ones that are popping to mind.
I think you've told me Dwarf Hawaiian does pretty good years past.
Yeah, but it's not a heavy yielder. It's a moderate yield, which is fine. But it's not like a commercial grade yield.
Yeah.
It's a medium producer in terms of amount of weight that you're getting.
Duncan's the winner. Duncan's the king.
Duncan's the king. Yeah. Duncan's the king in terms of total production. One of those big Duncan trees can make thousands and thousands of pounds of fruit on its own. It's an incredible sight to see. It really is. A lot to be said for a variety that can do something like that. It really helps keep us in business, actually, because of that kind of production. I'm leaving a few out that really impressed us, and I just can't. I know that later on I'm going to go, I should have mentioned that one, because that yielded incredibly this year. There were certainly a few of them out there. Our Honeykiss yielded pretty good. Those trees really stood out this year in terms of production, I think. So that's another one that deserves mention.
Okay, all right. So Ram's asking about Seacrest. I know that's one of Walter's favorite ones. Walter's Ills. What do you think of Seacrest?
I like Seacrest a lot. In fact, I liked it enough that I did plant one in my backyard. So it's one of the few varieties that I selected for my own backyard. Really nice citrus flavor. It's got the Gary citrus, as we call that. Very good appeal. Most people enjoy it. I'd rate it a 4 to 4.5 out of 5. It's not a 5, but it's a very good mango, capable of producing very well. But it does have that same issue we were discussing earlier, Paul, about flowering and then having a lot of male flowers, especially as a young tree. Seacrest is prone to making a lot of males when it's young. As it gets older, it starts to produce more female flowers, and then you start to see the good production habit from it. But we didn't get that much fruit from our Seacrest trees this year. Last year we had quite a bit. So those kind of disappointed a little bit, but I know they're capable of fruiting well. It's a vigorous tree, though. It's not a tree for a small yard.
And some people call it triple sec. So it has 2 names.
That's the nursery gave it that name. So it has 2 names. Most people know it as Seacrest, so we've continued to call it Seacrest. Sometimes we'll put Seacrest / triple sec, which of course is the name of like an orange liqueur, a reference to its citrus flavor.
Yeah. Okay. So somebody says, I'm in Puerto Rico, humidity and lots of rain here. Would you suggest some varieties to plant here?
Okay, yeah. Puerto Rico, that's tough. I don't know enough about the geography of it. I know that because you got a lot of humidity, you want to select stuff with good anthracnose resistance. I don't know. Some of the Florida mangoes have done okay there. Like they grow kit commercially there. They've grown Parvin commercially. Palmer's another one that they grow commercially down there. So I know that these Florida varieties can fruit, but I would err on the side of ones that fruit easier. I've heard Edward does well in Puerto Rico, and Edward flower is easy here. So that one might be worth investigating because Edward's a very good mango. Dwarf Hawaiian is from Puerto Rico, ironically enough. They originally called it Tete Nene was the name of that mango. That might be worth trialing down there since that's where it was selected because it flowers under tropical conditions. What else?
But wouldn't Haitian mango, since it's in the same tropical environment, do?
Yeah, yep. The Haitian mangoes ought to perform well there. But again, I'm speculating here because I have actually never been to Puerto Rico. I know a little bit about their commercial industry, but I don't know enough about their geography to say for sure. But I would think that the Haitian varieties like Madame Francis, Baptiste, corn probably would do fine there. It's a matter of whether you like those mangoes or not. I would consider trying Fairchild because Fairchild was selected under tropical conditions. It was selected in the Panama Canal zone. I would not be surprised to see Fairchild do well in Puerto Rico. So that's one that you should think about trying, Fairchild, because it's a good tree.
Yeah,
very good tree.
I'd consider, if I was in that situation, looking at Dominican Republic and other Caribbean islands and seeing what's growing well there and consider those because it's the same.
Sure.
Yeah. But good.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. All right. So I want to keep this under 2 hours and we got about 15 minutes left. So we're going to go through the questions that are on, but the comments you put on the side do not necessarily go under it. And I know Alex does look back at these videos and answer some of them under them. So please, if you didn't get your question answered, write a comment below the video, or if you're watching this later on, write a comment below the video and we'll try to get to it at a future time. So another question, what are your thoughts on grafting late season scions and early season scions to establish a tree? Are you open to, and then they said, are you open to the public to stop by? I'd like to purchase some scions.
If you're going to be multi-grafting a stump, it's not a bad idea to have two distinct seasons amongst the varieties you're putting onto the stump, because of course that's going to extend your crop. Just understand that the early season one is probably going to flush growth before the late season one because its fruit's going to be off sooner. So the growth pattern of the canopy might be a little awkward in for some period of time. But it's not a bad idea. I've seen people do it, and you get an early crop and a later crop off of the same stump. The big thing is pairing the vigor. So whether it's a late or an early season variety, you want something, let's say that you pick a slow going later season variety, like a Neelam or a Honeykiss or something. Well, then that early season variety you put on there better be a slow growing one too, or it is going to outgrow that later one, and vice versa too. So you want to match the vigor of the varieties that you're putting onto that stump as best as you can. And even then, even when you do your best to match their relative growth habits, it's not unusual to see one outgrow the other. It still happens. So you'll have to watch the canopy, manage it in such a way to achieve balance so that one's not badly outgrowing the other.
Okay. And by the way, depending when you're watching this, there's still about 3 weeks left of your scion season.
Not even. Actually, we're going to stop taking the last budwood orders the last Saturday of this month. And then we will be shipping out the last budwood orders that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of that week. So not a lot of time left. We're going to do a budwood check tomorrow for everybody's list that have been submitted in the last week. We are going to send an email out this coming week to remind everyone, hey, this is going to be the last week of budwood checks being accepted before it's over for mango. Now we will continue taking budwood checks for avocado, sapodilla, mamey, our non-mango species. But when mango is done, when the budwood is finished, it's finished. We will not be taking mango budwood orders in the month of September or beyond until probably April of next year. It is a hard cutoff, so there's not a lot of time left. Remember that the checklists are not in any way guaranteed. If you submit a checklist with us, that's just the list that we're going to go and check. it does not mean we'll find active buds. And so an option for people who are really wanting to get something and they haven't been able to get it from us because they just haven't caught the budwood at the right time, we can clip dormant material for you if you want, but you need to contact us directly and say, hey, I'm willing to take dormant scions in an effort to get this or that variety that you haven't been able to get, and maybe it just wasn't available, didn't have good buds, swelling buds the week that we checked it. So something to keep in mind, grafters that are watching right now, we can clip dormant material, but you got to call us. Okay.
Okay. And you base all your, when you're selling those, based on what you just said, the probability and the buds and everything, is this is the best
Yeah,
time.
we're looking for active buds on the scions. We want to see swelling bud. A swelling bud has to be present somewhere on there. And I look pretty closely because I'm the one that runs the budwood checks. So like I look very thoroughly, and a lot of times we might only find one good scion on a tree, and that tree might be the only example of that cultivar in our collection. So it can be tough to find good budwood sometimes.
Okay. So Irvin says he's planting dwarf varieties, and he says, would you consider planting a Nam Doc Mai #4 as a dwarf variety? And also,
No.
how does it taste and what is its production?
No, Nam Doc Mai #4 is not a dwarf tree. It is a dense, kind of a compact, I don't even want to call it compact, a very dense canopy, but it is not a dwarf. If I could show you, we have 2 of them at the farm, not a dwarf tree. I'm not sure where that reputation or rumor originated from, but now the Gizelle nursery has grafted some to a dwarfing stock. I forget if that's rootstock A or H, but it does dwarf the Nam Doc Mai #4. However, if you don't have one grafted onto that rootstock, it's usually not going to be so dwarfish. I don't like Nam Doc Mai that much personally. I'm not a huge fan of the flavor, but if I was going to grow one Nam Doc Mai, it would not be the #4. I'd probably grow the Moon or the Siatong before I'd grow a #4, because the #4 has split a little too frequently for us compared to the other types of Nam Doc Mai. But I don't think it's a top tier mango. I think it's one of the most overrated mangoes in existence.
Okay, well,
Just my opinion.
yeah, we want to get the comments in that are already here, so but we're gonna only have 10 minutes left, so we're gonna go a little faster, everybody. And remember, put your comments below the video after the video is done if we didn't get to yours. Somebody's asking about the Bennett Alfonso. We already kind of spoke about that. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, or we can keep going. Somebody
They
said,
ask about it. I can't see the questions.
they said, what's your opinion about the observation of the Bennett Alfonso tree?
It's been a much more productive version of the traditional Alfonso, much more willing to flower and more willing to hold on to fruit. So it's definitely a distinct variety, variation of Alfonso. And that's what I would have to say.
Okay, so next question was, would you recommend top working a Valkyrie stump? It's about 5 feet tall. Does the inner stock matter? If so, which varieties might do well on the Valkyrie stump?
There's not enough research to say that one inner stock is preferable over another, so I wouldn't be concerned about that. I can't say that one variety will do better on Valkyrie inner stock than another, so don't concern yourself with that aspect. It's perfectly viable to top work it, so it's an option.
Okay, what are some Indo-Chinese varieties that would do well in Southwest Florida?
Indo-Chinese, if we're talking about like Indo-Chinese flavor, which we distinguish from Thai flavor, okay? A few that I like for Southwest Florida are Cac, Saigon, Fairchild. What else? Indo-Chinese. Sweet Tart, I think, could do all right in Southwest Florida. Sassy Love, for sure. Can't leave that one off. That's an Indo-Chinese flavor. The Gizelle Indo-Chinese itself, the zinc mango, we've had people ordering those for a few years, and that's a great mango in its own right. What are some other Indo-Chinese types? Buttercream was pretty good this year. The Zil P22, The P22 is a really, really good Indo-Chinese flavored mango that I think people over on the West Coast should try out. What else? Well, that's certainly a good list there.
Okay. Somebody says, when grafting sapodilla, is it better to do veneer graft or cliff graft?
I've always cleft grafted them. You can veneer graft them, I imagine, but I've only done clefts with saps.
Okay. Would love a list of some of the sprays Alex listed. So do you have one on your website, maybe, or maybe?
Of the spray? Oh, no. You're talking about the disease control stuff? I mean, but we went over that. I mean, I guess they can just rewind to that question. So I don't want to seem like I'm shilling for any particular product either. The thing to keep in mind is using multiple classes of fungicide against anthracnose. Make sure that the product is indicated against anthracnose, and if it's a powdery mildew product, then you really only need to choose one. Versus the anthracnose, you want to keep in mind you want to be using at least 2. Some people use 3 different products against anthracnose.
Okay. Did you hear of the dubious mango or the dubious mango?
Dustus from Trinidad. Yes, I'm familiar with it. We thought we got it. I got a graft from the Fruit and Spice Park, or took budwood from there, and I don't think it's the real thing. So I don't have the real Trini Dustus or Dudus or however it's pronounced. So I'm familiar with it, but I don't have it.
All right. Somebody has a question about a star fruit tree, which is so off topic here, but how do I get my trees?
That's okay.
How do I get my trees stem thicker?
Well, you want it to grow, you probably should fertilize it, give it nutrients. Some kind of a nitrogen fertilizer will certainly grow the trunk. With fruit trees, I often favor palm tree fertilizer. And, applications during the warmer months of the year, the wetter months of the year, usually get absorbed pretty quickly.
Okay. Rosemary.
And that'll grow the trunk.
Okay. Rosemary said she grew a mango from a seed. Can she name it? Yes, you can name it yourself. And she said maybe she can send you a picture and you can give us some tips on who the parent might be. It's very colorful. Way too difficult. You'd have to.
That's some speculation there. I don't know without knowing where it came from or what. I wouldn't be able to tell. I don't think if I tried it, tasted the fruit, then I might be able to speculate based on common trees in South Florida, but really hard to do that from a photo or something like that.
Okay, so Rosemary's asking, do you like Karen Michelle or fruit punch?
I like fruit punch better than Karen Michelle in terms of flavor. Karen Michelle is a very good mango though, so I'm not dissing Karen Michelle. But fruit punch is just a little more exciting to me because of its subacid component. I really like that classic subacid. Karen Michelle to me is a classic group mango. So this is a distinction actually between a classic flavored mango and a classic subacid. So fruit punch would be a classic subacid from the Zill 80 line of mangoes. Fruit punch is a Zill 80 seedling. And on its best days, I like Zill 80, or I'm sorry, not Zill 80, fruit punch better. But talking about inconsistent mangoes, fruit punch is not consistent. So Karen Michelle has been a little more consistent in that respect. But the best fruit punch has tasted better than the best Karen Michelle to me.
And the same person is asking, how do you like pina colada?
I love pina colada. Pina colada is like a top 5 quality mango to me. They actually fruit okay for us in West Palm Beach, but I know that they won't fruit okay for a lot of people. Especially if you don't take really, really good care of them in terms of, the whole process of disease control and prevention. And so as much as I love it, it's just not a mango I recommend to people in good conscience. It's a collector's mango, very much so. And it's a collector's mango that you should probably expect to spray if you want to get consistent crops from it.
Okay. What's your season on buttercream and how are you ranking?
I had 2 crops on buttercream this year. I guess it's an early season mango, somewhere between early and mid season. It's certainly not a late mango. How do I rank it? It's like a 4 to 4.5 out of 5. Very good Indo-Chinese flavor, but I think I like the other new ZIL hybrids of Indo-Chinese class better. So I like P22, Sweet Tart, Sassy Love more than I like Buttercream.
Okay.
I rate them a little higher.
Okay, Alex has been so generous to let me taste and review many mangoes this season. Thank you so much. And it's helpful to everyone when I review these because we often talk about the trees. One of the mangoes I tasted this season, which is probably the most unique, and somebody's asking about it, the apricot mango. What's the season and how does it how productive is it?
Yeah, it's a mid-season mango as far as I can tell. We believe, I say we, and Walter Zill is the one that introduced that mango to me. Um, we're pretty sure that it's a Bombay seedling. It's very similar to Bombay, but it does seem to flower easier than Bombay, or want to at least. So to me, that looks like a promising alternative to the Bombay because it's so similar in flavor, and it does seem that it's going to flower easier in South Florida than the Bombay, which struggles to flower in Southeast Florida. And it so far has not been as vigorous as a Bombay, but ours is a top worked tree and in a somewhat shady spot, not like 100% shade or anything like that, but it could have been put in a better spot, I guess. That's one that I want more people to grow because I only have the one example and Walter has it at his place. And then there's the original tree in Delray Beach, and then that's it. That's it. So like, and then there's people that we sold the trees to, but I don't know how their trees are doing. Just in the last few years, we would have sold these things to them. So I really want more people to grow that because I think it's a very good mango. Paul, you were impressed with it. Um, I want to see how these things do in other parts of Florida. And if they do well, then that could be a variety that we start recommending and start producing on a more regular scale. Because up to this point, we've produced small numbers of them or just by order. But that's a promising new variety. The original tree is very old, but yeah.
Yes, okay. Can 4026 do well inland near the Everglades?
It has not had issues with anthracnose for us, so that's a good sign. But because I have not seen that tree fruiting elsewhere, I don't know if Gary Zill still has his or not. He's over in West Boynton. But I would speculate maybe, but you don't know until you try it. But because it hasn't gotten anthracnose for us doesn't mean that it won't get anthracnose when brought more inland. Because we've seen that happen with certain mangoes, like Venus, for example, doesn't get much anthracnose. It gets bacterial spot, but doesn't get anthracnose near the coast. But you take it in the Loxahatchee, and all of a sudden Venus is getting anthracnose. So I think it's worth trying, and see how it does. And I'd love to hear people's feedback on 4026 because it's a really exceptional fruit. And if it works out that it is disease resistant, enough to anthracnose, then there you've got something that's like almost a really similar to the Gary mango that people try it, they're just blown away by it, and potentially fruits better and stockier, almost not a dwarf tree, but like a smaller tree. So promising variety, probably deserves to be named at some point, but I think Gary Zill would have to be the one that give the name to it.
All right. Is Bango Pali productive in Florida?
It can be. I've seen a very decent production on a Bang & Polly over in the Lake Worth, Lantana area. So we just recently acquired it like a year ago, and we still haven't planted the trees. We have a couple of them in pots, but I've been getting tons of orders for the trees to be produced. And so every time I have to go get budwood, I got to go get it from Cecil Brumfield because he's the one that has it. But his has done okay. And I actually got to eat one the other day because I was over at Cecil's place and I was talking to him, and there was one up in the tree. So I took it home, and it was pretty good. It was better than I remembered it being. So it can fruit well here, but I think it's probably pretty prone to powdery mildew from what Cecil's told me. So be prepared to control disease on it, but it should flower and fruit here. It is a South Indian mango. The South Indian mangoes tend to fruit more prolifically here than the Central and Northern Indian mangoes.
Okay. So what is the best Thai mango for eating ripe to grow besides Manashanu?
See, if they had just asked me what's the best Thai mango for eating ripe, I probably would have said Mahashanuk. But since they said besides Mahashanuk, I like Moon Kun Si. I like Tong Dam, but I don't have enough experience with its productive habit in Florida. But amongst Thai mangoes, Moon Kun Si, Tong Dam, pretty good ones. The other Thai mangoes just don't excite me enough. Nam Dak Mai, Kiao Savoy, Pram Camus, they're fine, I guess. Ivory, yeah, I think I'd probably grow, if I was growing another Thai variety besides Maha, it'd either be Moon Kun Si or Tong Dam. And because Tong Dam, we've never had it. We've had it fruit, but it got outgrown by its stump mates. So then we had to put it on another stump. So, but those are the best eating Thai mangoes that I've had compared to the rest.
All right, we're gonna do 5 more questions, folks. Then we gotta go. So I want to keep this under 2 hours because I don't want people to get too lost when you're rewatching it. But we'll do this again. We'll do this.
I don't mind.
Okay. So what type of fertilizer do you use and when do you apply?
I suppose this is in reference to mangoes.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be different with different species. But with mangoes, young mango trees, we're talking about like small ones that you're not expecting to fruit for a couple of years. We usually give them what's essentially a palm tree fertilizer. It's an 8-2-12. There's other formulations that are similar, like 8-3-9, 8-2-10, whatever. You want that nitrogen number to be less than 10. Less than 10, because even young mango trees, which you want to give some nitrogen to just to get them established and growing, don't need a lot of it to grow. So you don't want to give it the one of these fertilizers that has a nitrogen percentage in the teens or something like that. So my rule of thumb is a tablespoon, like a level tablespoon per foot of tree height. So if you just planted this 3-foot tall tree or something like that, then you're going to be giving this 3-foot tree 3 tablespoons of a palm tree or fruit tree fertilizer. You want that fertilizer to contain minor elements like manganese, iron, zinc, boron. A lot of times these trace elements are deficient from the soil, especially in South Florida. So you want to make sure that that fertilizer you select has those trace elements. And then I also think you should foliar feed your trees with a micronutrient spray. Probably every other month is adequate. And you should do that even when they're bearing size. But once they've reached a size that they can support fruit production, and for a lot of trees, that's only like 4 feet tall, 4 feet, if their canopy is developed properly. And this is like a whole other discussion, in terms of like what size should you let your mango tree fruit. But if it's at a size that it's able to bear fruit, you should no longer give it nitrogen fertilizer. You got to cut that stuff out. You have to cut it out cold turkey. You stop giving it to the tree because it's really just to get it established initially. And that's it, because beyond that point, the nitrogen is going to be detrimental. And most commercial fertilizers do contain nitrogen. So you want to switch it to a potassium fertilizer, and you really only need to apply that like twice a year. Some people do it quarterly, but it's not something you need to be applying every month. The potassium fertilizer should have 0 nitrogen, so like a 0050, 0052. I like to give that stuff to bearing mango trees, and it's very beneficial in addition to micronutrients. So that's a good fertilizer practice for people growing mangoes in Florida.
Okay, is it worth planting and dunking, knowing many other varieties, Indo-Chinese varieties, knowing many taste better or are available?
Is it worth planting and dunking? It depends. if you are somebody who likes Indo-Chinese flavored mangoes and you want to get mangoes every year and you're growing them in a location that is not so optimal for mangoes, like the deep interior, then it is possibly worth planting Duncan, because Duncans are machines that will churn out fruit almost every year, and they are resistant to everything. And they can get powdery mildew and they'll set fruit right through the powdery mildew. Never had issues with anthracnose on Duncan out in Loxahatchee. I didn't even have to spray those trees and they would still fruit. So if you like that flavor, okay, it's possibly worth it depending on your situation. But if you have space for other trees, I would probably, there's definitely Indo-Chinese flavored mangoes that rate higher than Duncan. There's no question about it. Like I just listed a bunch of them earlier in this discussion. So, but if I was like over there on the, out in the sticks by the glades, and I wanted to just make sure I was getting fruit production from my trees without, even if I missed spray applications or whatever, then I grew Duncan in Loxahatchee. I had it out there. I had more than one. I want to say I had like 3 or 4 of them out there. I don't remember, but they fruited very well. And the other people that grew it, they fruited well for it too. So there's something to be said for that. I always like to say that about Duncan, that there is something to be said for a mango that has that level of production, that level of disease resistance. So it's just a balance of like, in terms of like what kind of threshold do you accept in terms of flavor from your mango, in terms of what you expect. The later season Duncans are usually pretty good mangoes. The early ones, not as much.
We'll see a tong do well inland and taste.
Yeah, Namdok Mai Sia Tong definitely does fruit reasonably well inland, I think. It tastes like Namdok Mai. I can't, if you cut open a Sia Tong and a number 4 or moon, I couldn't tell the difference. It tastes like Namdok Mai. So if you like that Thai flavor, you'll like the Sia Tong, and it's a elegant looking fruit, and it doesn't split as badly as the number 4s do. So that's another plus. But it's a choice, it's an option for people that are inland, sure.
Does the amount of mangoes on a tree at one time affect the flavor?
Yes, it can. I've had this theory advanced to me before, that when a tree is really, really loaded with fruit, that it saps a lot of the bricks from the fruit, because the tree cannot put enough, I don't know how to express this properly, but like the sugar content is going to be lower, typically speaking, on the earlier fruit that are coming off of a tree that's loaded with mangoes. I just talked about Duncan, how the earlier Duncans aren't as good as the later Duncans. That might be a factor why. But we've seen this with other varieties too that have large crops, and like, the later sweet tarts, for example, sweet tarts can really load up. The later sweet tarts are almost always better than the earlier ones, even though the earlier ones can still taste good. So I can't say that's always the case, but it can happen. In fact, I've had this conversation with Gary Zill before, and he's one of the people that subscribes to that theory that when a tree is really overloaded with mangoes, that it will impact the flavor, at least of the first 25% of the crop or so that comes off of it.
Okay. And when will you start shipping mangoes to mango grafting requests to California? Will they have
trees?
Stuff? It says, when will you start shipping the mango grafting request to California? Will they have non-turpentine rootstock? So people have asked, do you ship in general to California now, in general, or no?
We ship trees. We have, so we do have certification to ship trees to California in 1 and 3 gallon sizes. I think we got approval for 7 gallon, but we don't ship 7 gallon trees, so it's kind of irrelevant. It would only matter if you came and picked them up and brought them there. But 1 and 3 gallon trees we do ship to California. We had a little issue with the state of Florida because they forgot to reissue our nematode certificate. So there was a couple weeks where we could not ship trees to California until that certificate got reissued. But we did get them to correct it, and they got us our certificate again. So we are shipping trees currently there. 1 and 3 gallon. In terms of graft requests, it depends on when you place the graft request and whether we grafted it independent of your request, like recently or not. Because if we didn't and we don't have any spares, then we have to graft the tree for you. And if anything we graft now during the current graft session is going to be grafted, let's say between now and October, it won't be ready until spring of next year. That could be any time between March and the end of May. But if it's something that we recently grafted and we have spares of, we could ship it to you before the fall or by the fall or something like that. And then it comes down to what kind of shipping do you want? Do you want express or ground? But we've shipped a lot of trees. Now, California, yes, we do offer non-turpentine rootstocks. It's not guaranteed because there's certain varieties that we might not have on anything but turpentine, but we use a lot of non-turpentine stocks. And there's pretty good anecdotal evidence that these do seem to grow better in California's conditions than the turpentine stocks, unfortunately. So, but you need to make sure that you inquire about that if you're going to have a preference for non-turpentine stock. But we're one of the only nurseries that offers that to California residents. Almost all the nurseries shipping to California are shipping trees that are grafted to turpentine.
No, okay, and quite another question about California says, do you think we can maybe get a video dedicated to Southern California growers because the growing demand here? The main issue is powdery mildew, and most, so maybe one day you and I could do a video for California.
Yeah. Now keep in mind, I have never grown mangoes in California. I have been to Southern California. I've seen mango trees growing there. And I've communicated with plenty of Californians about growing mangoes over there, but I don't have firsthand experience. It's all based on, either what people have told me or what I would speculate based on what their experiences are would do well. So when I say something like, I think Gizelle mango might do really well in California, that's based on the traits of that variety here in terms of its vigor and so forth. Why I think that might do well in a place like California, and why certain mangoes might not do well because they maybe grow too slowly. So yeah, Paul, we could possibly do that. I've always kind of wanted to go and see like how some of these folks are doing with their mango trees. We've shipped a lot of trees over there, and I've gotten some feedback, but not nearly as much as I want. But some people have been generous enough with their time to let me know how some varieties have done for them versus others. So there's certain varieties that we know do well, like peach cobbler I mentioned earlier. We know that does well in Southern California. Sweet tart is another one. The guy mentioned powdery mildew. Powdery mildew is not that hard to control, guys. It just takes some consistency and effort, but it's not rocket science.
Well, when
you can
people are
definitely control it.
With these big trees, when people are spraying them, like you got these big, machines that get to the top of the trees and everything. So when a backyard has a big tree, how do they spray a big tree?
It depends. So like, for one thing, their tree shouldn't be big, but that sometimes is outside of their control because maybe they bought the house with a big tree on it. Because you definitely don't want to allow your tree to get big, and that's one of the reasons why. But if you have an existing large tree, short of pruning the tree down to a more manageable size, you might have to invest in a battery operated sprayer instead of like a pump sprayer, because the battery operated types with a strong stream can reach pretty far up, probably about as far as you're going to need to reach. Because keep in mind, above a certain point, you're not going to be able to pick the fruit that you would otherwise get up there anyway. We use obviously a gasoline powered sprayer, which can spray the enormous trees at the farm in West Palm Beach, but I don't expect a backyard grower to invest in something like that. But a battery operated one, like some of these 15-gallon sprayers I've seen, can reach pretty far with a boom or whatever. So
back to California, have you ever thought about or dreamed about, maybe, I know there's like these snowbirds here in Florida and New York. Have you ever thought about opening up an extension of Tropical Acres Farms in California? And once you got the farm settled here and workers on it, where you can go back and forth, and have you ever thought about something like that or dreamed about something like that?
No, not really. I no, I just haven't because I don't consider California to be a great climate for mangoes. And the reason is because you look at these trees, and years later they're the same size as they were when they were planted, or not marginally bigger. Um, it's just too dry. It's too cold. Yes, you can grow them there. Absolutely, no question about it. And there are people growing them commercially there, but like the only benefit to me is the fact that you can get really exceptionally flavored mangoes during that period of time where it's so dry and hot. But I'd rather grow the fruit in a climate where the trees are going to grow at a more reasonable pace than in that, arid, dry climate that is Southern California. And I don't have to worry about freezes and stuff like that, which obviously in parts of Florida you still have to be concerned with that. But like I'd rather be growing in coastal Palm Beach County than any other part of the United States. And that includes Southern California. I'd rather grow mangoes in West Palm Beach, Florida than in, LA or Redlands or one of these places that people grow mangoes in Southern Cal. So don't take that as a diss, Californians. It's just that I don't have any particular desire to grow them now over in those places. Now, there's parts of the world that I envy. The Pacific coast of Mexico, the northern Pacific coast of Mexico. That's a pretty optimal place to grow mangoes. And that would be cool, I think, to try to grow some stuff there that doesn't fruit as well over here or whatever, and see how it does over on that side. Because it's further south than Southern California is. So it's a little different there. But other than that, I'm pretty content with the area that we're growing them in. So
Wonderful. And remember, everybody, California, I know those of you that have experience know this, but those of you that are new, Florida's more tropical environment. You're going to do much better with tropical trees here. California, more Mediterranean climate. California, probably, when you look at variety, one of the best growing places in the world. I know so many people there with amazing farms, but mango's more of a tropical tree and does better here in South Florida. And so keep that in mind when you're making choice to grow. I know there's a wonderful nursery in Southern California called Exotica, I think it is. And they have good things that grow down there for their climate.
Yeah, I will say the thing I envy Californians actually is your ability to grow stone fruits. Peaches, plums, apricots. I wish I could grow that. I mean, we can grow peaches here, and some plums, but you guys can grow, so much of that stuff, and it does well. And so if I owned land in Southern California, that's the stuff I'd be growing.
Well, I hope you wouldn't. I hope you wouldn't, because you can grow so much amazing stuff. I would not waste the space or time on a peach if I can grow like the most amazing figs in the world and like all these white zapotes and everything that grows amazing out there.
Right. Well,
I love peaches and love plums, but plums, I'll leave that to the northern climates. I mean, if I can grow like figs or just amazing stuff, because I have friends that have farms in California. One of my friends had a jujube farm down there, and jujubes there is a whole nother story than the ones we grow here, because they crumble up into the Chinese dates and the nuts you can grow out there. My friend had a pistachio farm out there, absolutely amazing.
I think that's the kind of stuff that I would be growing if I was in Southern California, and maybe I'd try some mangoes. There's been a lot of interest amongst Californians in seedling mango trees, particularly seedlings of some of the polyembryonic varieties of mangoes that are more likely to come true from types. So we've sent some of these seedlings there. We sent people cotton candy seedlings, sweet tart seedlings, and then they wanted them. They wanted them as seedlings because they believed the seedling trees will perform better than the grafted trees in the long run there as mangoes are concerned. They actually do fruit faster as seedling trees there than they do as seedling trees in Florida. So in Florida, you're looking at 5 to 8 year juvenile period, sometimes longer. California, they get their seedlings to fruit in 3 years, or at least a lot of them do, it sounds like. So it might be worth trying if you're a mango aficionado in Southern California and frustrated with the pace of growth and stuff like that. something to think
Yes,
about.
yes. Well, Alex, I want to remind everybody that on tropicalacresfarms.com website, the links below the video, there's an amazing list of every single mango, the 300 varieties plus that he has on the farm, and descriptions on all of them. It's where I go to when I'm researching mangoes, and he does a good job doing the best to keep that updated. He also has a list of what during in season, what mango boxes are available, and there's still a few more weeks of that left, but it's getting more sporadic. And also the budwood season, as you mentioned, there's another week left, depending when you're looking on that. But he has a ton of information on that website. The links below the video get there, and he also has just a lot of other videos that we've done on Pacific trees and varieties on my YouTube page here, so you can go and check those out. Some of them have gotten a lot of views because of the various mangoes he talks about in different topics. But remember, everybody, on this video to like it and subscribe if you're not subscribed, and just check out their website. They have a lot of stuff, and if you're in the South Florida area, whether you live here or you're visiting, you definitely at some point try when they're open to visit them. It's just a really amazing experience to be in a spot that has 300 varieties of mangoes growing all around you, and it's really something to see all the stuff they're doing there. So thank you, Alex, for taking the time tonight to do this.
Oh yeah, thanks, Paul. And yeah, if you go to our website and you want to read about mangoes, you go to the mangoes page and you scroll down. There's a PDF link that Paul mentioned, and you can click on the names of any variety that we happen to be growing, and we'll tell you everything that has been our experience growing that mango, at least. And we do update those descriptions. I will update them once we're past mango season. We're still technically in mango season now, but it's almost done. And so it's a good resource for learning about different varieties of mangoes. And whether you choose to do business with us or not, we hope you'll take advantage of that. And we appreciate all the feedback we receive from people, and I'm glad you participated in this. So
great. All right, everybody. Thank you again. Remember, if you didn't get your question answered, if you have more questions, post those questions below the video in the comments, and we'll try to get to them again in the future. Until then, everybody have a great day, a great night, and keep growing.
Thank you.